Which of the Jazz young players has the best potential? And what's the future for Keyonte George? All part of an Ask LOJ edition of Locked on Jazz.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Microphone fixed. Thank you for the tip from yesterday. It happens sometimes when I switch locations, and I came back from Vegas. So thank you. I think we've got it set. A great Ask LOJ edition of Locked on Jazz is ahead. I am David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. We're going to start it off revisiting the trades from a year ago at the trade deadline that infuriated many people. Was Danny Ainge and Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck right in those deals? Then the development of our young players is really the question line of what we've seen there so far. Should we be concerned about where Taylor Hendricks is going into year two? What's the latest on Lowry Markkanen trades? What's the trade market for other players? And then we'll wrap up Ask LOJ with a few off-the-wall questions as well. That's what's coming up on today's edition of Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to become a Jazz fan, to be a Jazz fan. We talk Jazz. You tune in, you know you're getting Utah Jazz each and every time on the program. Thank you very much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps and on YouTube. And to the everydayers, you're the best. Thank you for being here each and every day. Friday edition is the Ask LOJ edition, and you guys make it with great questions. So I loved this to start off. Jazz made a couple of trades at the deadline earlier this year. Now that we know both ends of the deal, and they're not just picks, who would you say won each deal? Well, let's look at the three deals. So the Jazz trade Kelly Olynyk and Ochai Agbaji to Toronto for what becomes Isaiah Collier. Okay, so the first thing is on that trade was the play, a little bit also opening the door to Bryce Sensabaugh about Ochai Agbaji. Ochai Agbaji now in his career is shooting in 137 games, is shooting 42% from the field and 32.6% from three. He's really designed to be a fabulous defensive playing 3-and-D guard, but in his last year, he shot 29% from three. He doesn't have like a big dribble game. He's not an extreme rebounder. He's an on-ball defensive. And so the big decision here was that at 23 years old and his development seemingly stymied, that Ochai Agbaji was worth moving. Okay, so time's going to tell on that one. So we still don't entirely know on that. Kelly Olynyk, I think with Taylor Hendricks on the roster, the decision was made that the Jazz would probably not play the free agent game and re-sign Kelly Olynyk. As nice a player as he is, it just didn't kind of match where they were. And with John Collins, Kelly Olynyk, Walker Kessler, Lowry Markkanen on the roster, you're impeding any chance for Taylor Hendricks to play. So you get Isaiah Collier out of this deal. We'll see. Does Isaiah Collier have a better upside than Ochai Agbaji? To me, that's really kind of the definition of this deal. And time will tell. Some special skills in Isaiah Collier. As I talked about yesterday, a singular route to get on the floor, which is play point guard. He's not going to ever be a shooting guard. Doesn't seem. And so that's going to be his challenge, but he does seem to have some really special, unique skills. So that's the first trade. The second trade is the Jazz trade Simone Fontecchio to Detroit in exchange for what now is Kyle Filipowski. What's interesting on this deal, I think you have to remember, is when Detroit asks for Simone Fontecchio and they have all this cap space, they're basically saying, hey, we're going to give him an offer that you're not going to match. Now, Detroit saves a ton of money because they do not end up giving Simone a very big offer, and much less than I thought. If they had tried to sign Simone as a restricted free agent, they would have had to go bigger than this. I think the Jazz would have matched this offer from Detroit. The one part of this story is Detroit's front office changes here. So the feeling when Detroit calls and says, hey, we want Simone Fontecchio, and you're the Jazz, you're like, well, we're screwed because they have all this cap space. And if they're willing to give up something for him now, it just means they're willing to trade for him even more. And what gets interesting about that is that the front office ends up changing in Detroit, and he gets a 2-year, $16 million deal, which is far less than I thought he was going to get. And so for a 2-year, $16 million deal, you do wonder whether or not maybe the Jazz wish they could have signed him, but there's just no way to know that. So the question then is, would you rather have Kyle Filipowski or Simone Fontecchio? Simone is 28 years old, and obviously Filipowski is a youngster, and that's the part of that. The third part of this, when you evaluate these trades, is would you like to have Cody Williams as well? Because the real thing that these trades did is put the Jazz back in a position to get their pick. Had the Jazz slipped to 9th instead of 8th, they don't get their pick when that lottery's done. They would have slipped to 11th, and Oklahoma City would have had it. Can you imagine if Oklahoma City got Cody Williams and Jalen Williams? So you can look at all these trades, but you have to look at them in their full picture, which is what the Jazz got for Kelly Olynyk and Ochai Agbaji and Simone Fontecchio, those 3 players, is Cody Williams, Isaiah Collier, and Kyle Filipowski. They got all of them. To me, that seems like a pretty good deal. I don't know if Isaiah Collier will be better than Ochai Agbaji. I don't know if I think Kyle Filipowski will be better than Simone Fontecchio over the long run. I'm not, Simone at 28. Again, timeline issue. But I do know that I feel pretty comfortable that the addition of Cody Williams, Isaiah Collier, and Kyle Filipowski will give the Jazz more than Ochai Agbaji and Simone Fontecchio. That's really what the trade becomes at this point, is Cody Williams, Isaiah Collier, Kyle Filipowski for Simone Fontecchio and Ochai Agbaji. That's really what it became, because that was the key, was that it allowed us to lose enough games to keep our pick. It's an interesting, great question. Do you think Keyonte will develop better if he's the primary ball handler all the time, or if he can be a secondary ball handler behind a veteran point guard? This is a great question. I thought Keyonte was overwhelmed by his season last year. And I am excited to see when when Keyonte George is not overwhelmed. For those of you that just flipped onto YouTube or on YouTube, I have a screen up. I don't know if it's big enough for you to see. If you're on a phone, it's certainly not. The following is the 57 players who in the last 20 years in the NBA, who in their rookie season shot below 40% from the field, below 35% from 3, and played 50 games. So Keyonte last year shot 39 and 33. So this is below 40 and below 35. And those that here are the list of players that shot as Keyonte did as a rookie. Dennis Smith Jr., Trey Burke, Emmanuel Mudiay, Russell Westbrook, J.R. Smith, Bruce Brown, Ben McLemore. These are guards, only guards. Josh Okogie, Lonzo Ball, Theo Maledon, Keyonte George, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Dante Exum, Marcus Smart, Scoot Henderson, DeAnthony Melton, Sebastian Telfair, Austin Rivers, Kemba Walker, Daquan Cook, Yakuaba Dwara, who didn't ever make it, Andrew Harrison, Alexi Shved, Eli Okubo, KJ McDaniels, Jordan Poole, Ron Baker, Tony Snell, Phil Pressey, Frank Ntilikina, Chris Dunn, Jerian Grant, Gary Harris, Rashad Vaughn, Dwayne Bacon, Will Barton, Daniel Ewing, Orion Green, Jeff Teague, that's a good sign right there, Marcus Williams, Bobby Brown, Norris Cole, Malcolm Delaney, Nicholas Brasuno, Danielle Taylor, Ben Shepard for Indiana last year, Nick Stauskas, Samani Christian, DeMonica McGuire, Malik Monk, Kent Bazemore, Brandon Boston, Jody Meeks, Reiko Kyra Lewis Jr., Jared Bayless, Shelvin Mack. It's not a great list. Now, some of this is a little different because we have effective field goal percentage and things like that. And if you start to search it, Keyonte's effective field goal percentage is the second best of any of those players. So because he shot so many more threes, you have to be a little careful about that because his three volume per 100 possessions is the second or third highest. Of Malik Monk's the only player at a higher three-point volume, and he came through. And Jordan Poole is next, and he's come through pretty well. So it's a little misleading. So I don't want to panic on that. But to the point of your question, whatever, I think lessening the burden a little bit on Keyonte would help him have a more efficient shooting experience, and he needs to have a more shooting experience. So it would be great if we had some sort of other ball handler on the roster that relieves some of that burden on Keyonte so he could come off pin downs, play without the ball, set himself up, get a mismatch, do some things like that to get rolling. All right, more Keyonte questions coming. Plus, we switched the focus a little bit onto the development of this next group and what of this group, Keyonte, Taylor, Cody, Isaiah, Kyle Filipowski, has the biggest upside and the biggest potential. That's next on Locked On Jazz. Today's edition of Locked On Jazz is brought to you by Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street, also located in Logan and in Linden. The Murdochs is a family, been in Utah for well over 80 years. They want to make sure you have the no regrets experience. That's the key. I talk to Blake all the time, and that's what he prides himself on more than anything else, is the fact that you get a no regrets experience, that he can see you in the grocery store, the church, wherever it is around town, and know that you got a great experience. And then there's the Hyundai car. I've bought 3 of them, so I'm a fan. They're so well made. They give you all the bells and whistles, and the price point's unbelievable. I'm driving the Palisade right now. Adore it. Absolutely adore it. I've bought the Ioniq. I've bought each kid a Santa Cruz. I'm all in on the Hyundai because for what I get for the bells and whistles and the price point and the safety features and for me to look, it's unprecedented. So stop by Murdoch Hyundai, located in 3 locations: in Murray at 4646 South State Street, in Logan, and in Linden. And if you're going to stop by, email me first and give me the chance to give you the VIP meeting you deserve for being a Locked On everydayer. That's at Murdoch Hyundai, 4646 South State Street, also in Logan and Linden. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On, the official sportsbook of MLB. FanDuel, the summer, a little different sports-wise. So what's FanDuel? They're going to make it fun for you. Get a little bit more out of the game with FanDuel this summer by hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel is the official betting partner of Major League Baseball. FanDuel is the official sportsbook of Locked On. And FanDuel is your way to make the game a little bit more fun. Weekend coming up here, you've got the Open Championship. Shane Lowry is now the odds-on favorite with Scottie Scheffler second. That does seem to make a lot of sense to have Scottie Scheffler second. Xander Schauffele is at plus 1,100 as the third. So they really, right now, the way, and I haven't checked it as I'm recording, I haven't checked what's going on in the all the events taking place. Maybe there's been a runaway on the scoreboard, and this makes sense to you as I record this. But Xander's plus 1,100, Patrick Cantley's plus 1,800. So it's a 2-man race in the minds of the odds makers at FanDuel for the Open Championship right now. You can also jump aboard and get all sorts of other fun things with WNBA and Major League Baseball. The All-Star game this weekend for the WNBA, Major League Baseball's back in work. It's all at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps. For your second listen today, check out the Big Six in 60. It is the 6 biggest stories in the sports world from the local experts of Locked On. It's a pretty great way to get caught up on everything that's going on. Tell me what you think of it. And we hope to have the big 3s coming for you as well. All right, there's one more question about Key. Do you think Key falls into the group of rookies who had a good first year, won't make the jump in year 2, or a bad one year 1 and make the jump in second year? I think he's got to make a jump. That's kind of what I was just talking about there with that shooting. He's got to make a jump in year 2. He's got all the skills. He's dynamic. He does all these things. He's got to make the jump in year 2 to be a more efficient offensive player. That's the thing. The first 41 games, what I'm watching for Key is if the ball goes in the hole. He's got to start making shots. He didn't make a lot in college, and he's got to make shots. That, to me, jumps out more than anything else for Key. All right. In your opinion, which player on the Jazz roster has the most potential? So I'm in on Cody Williams. I think Cody Williams has the most potential. The easy answer is Key because we've seen it. We've seen the 10 3-point games or the 9 3-point games. We've seen the off-the-bounce dribble 3, which is so good. We've seen the set of skills. But I think if you get the most potential of any one player on this roster and you'd start to chisel away at the outside features, I think Cody Williams is the one who could probably be the most skilled player of the group. There's a lot of developmental things that have to take place for him, but I do think that he probably has the highest skill level potential. The ability for him to get up over the cup on these one-step, long stride plays that we kept seeing, his ability to finish at the rim, I thought was super. His footwork on his jump shots, not super. That's a fixable thing that I think will help him with his release and a bunch of things. His handle, one person was asking me about that. Why do you keep saying Cody Williams can't handle? Seems like every game we see him helping bring the ball up and initiating the offense multiple times. So my comment on Cody is I didn't think he created for himself off the bounce, and that's when I probably should have been more clear about what I meant by that. That's not something I think he can do. However, we did see more and more. So I agree with the questioner. We did see more and more signs, and we did see the Jazz make him bring the ball up in summer league and initiate the offense a bunch of times. So again, that's, I think, one of those cases where, yeah, there are these pieces and these skills that are in there that he can put together and add to his game. And like, I see it. And then if he becomes more and more comfortable with that, that's pretty great. So I'm bullish, very, very, very bullish on Cody Williams. So a big thing, here's the next question. So there's a big thing, was a red flag to me, is when Ochai Agbaji did not pop off in summer league, and that kind of the same thing for Taylor Hendricks this year. Should I be concerned? Maybe not as much. On Ochai, we tried to put the ball in his hands and see him make plays and become more than just a 3-and-D defender, and he did not do that. And then he didn't shoot well last year. He got caught up in some fundamentals. I think he's going to shoot fine. Actually, I think over time we're going to see Ochai Agbaji be able to, I think, pull his career back together. I think the shooting last year was kind of a fluke. Taylor, as I've talked about a lot in the last few shows, and the everydayers know this, is I think it has a large to do with the fact that his game is predicated on other things happening around him for him to get off and get his game going. He also just has such an incredible body. So does Ochai, but a little bit longer. I think there's a lot of things that Taylor can do in the game, regardless of whether or not he's scoring. In his 3-point shooting, that ball does seem to go in from the corner. It'd be nice if he could get in above the break quadrant 3. But I think there's a little like red flag, little tiny bit of concern. Like, to me, the balance and lateral movement are the things I really want to watch and see whether those improve. His strength looks so much better. His bodies look so great. That's actually what's kind of keeping me lessening the concern on Taylor Hendricks. Cody Williams has pleasantly surprised me. Could he be a starter for the first regular season game? And do you think the Jazz still need a point guard like Tyus Jones? There's a pretty heavy rumor around the league that Tyus Jones is going back to Memphis, and that Memphis is trying to get off Zaire Williams, which is an interesting question of whether the Jazz should be the one who takes him. He's 6'9", 215. He was the 6th biggest recruit in his class. He was the 10th pick of the draft in 2021, and he has not been able to shoot. And his time is diminishing. He shot 30% from 3 so far in 3 seasons, and Memphis is evidently throwing, the word is that Memphis is kind of, okay, we missed. I don't really, at this point, he didn't shoot well in college either. At Stanford, he had a terrible first year. It was COVID year, and that was the explanation. He shot 37% and 29% from 3. At some point, he's now done that for 4 straight years. I might not be that interested in taking Zaire Williams, but Tyus Jones rumored to be heading there. Do I think Cody Williams could start? if I'm reading this correctly, Cody Williams would have to start in front of any one of three players. He'd have to start in front of John Collins. He'd have to start in front of Taylor Hendricks, or he'd have to start in front of Colin Sexton. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you're starting Colin Sexton, you start Cody Williams at 3, you're sliding Lowry to the 4. So now he's starting in front of Taylor Hendricks or John Collins if Walker Kessler's your 5. Or if John Collins is your 5, then he's starting in front of Taylor Hendricks. I don't think that happens. If Cody Williams starts at your 2 and Taylor Hendricks is starting and Colin Sexton is now coming off the bench, that's possible. But as long as Jordan Clarkson's on the roster, then are they both coming off the bench together? I do think the Jazz think that Colin Sexton is a 6th man on a really good team over time. I kind of get that vibe. So Cody Williams would then start over Colin Sexton. He better be really, really good in training camp during a starting job over Colin Sexton, would be my comment to that. So good question. But that's the scenarios by which that would have to happen, I think. Let's see, where was our next question? I kind of went out of order there because I thought it fit. How much time do you think each of our young players spend in the G League this year? Our rosters, who's our backup point guard right now? So I kind of need to understand how our roster's finishing out. Unless our 4 guards are just Keyonte George, Colin Sexton, Bryce Sensabaugh, and Jordan Clarkson, we're just going to, but Bryce did not handle great in camp. So as of right now, we do not have a backup point guard. If we get a backup point guard, I think Isaiah Collier spends the year in the G League learning how to play point guard and really becoming a point guard. Kyle Filipowski could end up being in the G League to get time if he's not getting time with the Jazz. I think Cody Williams is a rotation player for us next year. So I think the most likely to spend the most time in the G League is Isaiah Collier if we find a backup point guard, and then Kyle Filipowski. This is from another question today. You seem less high on Collier. I still like him a lot. I do too. So far in 6 summer league games, averaging 10 points on 9 shots, 4.5. So I like him a lot. My point yesterday was that the route by which Isaiah Collier gets on the floor is 1. He only has 1 route to get on the floor, and that's to be a point guard. That's hard, and that's a skill he has to develop of how to run the team, be a point guard, stay in control. And he was better at it than I ever thought he would be, having watched his USC film. But what just became clear to me is he's not 6'5", and he's not a natural shooter in any way, so he's not going to be playing off ball. Like, his route to being an NBA player is playing on the ball. So that just limits the route by which he gets on the floor. That was my point. Nothing about him as a player. In fact, his shake is as great as I thought it would be. His ability to get downhill is as good. He doesn't have a floater game. He'll learn it. He doesn't have a pull-up game. He'll learn it. Or he has limited pull-up game. He'll learn it. And I think he sees the floor and makes a lot of nice passes. So I think there's a real chance that's going to be his route. And he might be our backup point guard the way things are right now. So and he might be really good at it. But that to me is the route by which he ends up getting playing time in this league. All right, let's turn the focus to Lowry and roster building when we continue on Locked On Jazz. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Jazz. Thanks so much for tuning in. For your second listen today, check out the Big 6 in 60. All right. If the Jazz keep Lowry, do you think they make additional improvements to the roster? There's not a lot of other additional improvements to the roster that are necessarily there to be made. So I'm not sure what those would be entirely with where the market is and how the market is playing right now. So that's my one thought is if we keep Lowry, I think we're still in a developmental stage. I don't think it changes our direction of where we're going. And it gives us, Danny said the whole time he wants that piece or two. So if we can go big game hunting, we can then add on and it gives us that. But like, do we suddenly go get Brandon Ingram if we keep Lowry? I don't think so. Other than extending Lowry, what else do you think we do with the cap space? I think we use the cap space possibly to help teams get out of the first or second apron and get something for it, whether it's a pick or two, a first-round pick or a second-round pick, or just something that allows us to, and we get, it's a way to acquire another asset. If someone needs $12 million and we clear all of our left cap space, which is $12 million, we probably get a first-round pick for that. If someone just needs $1 million or $2 here or there, we can do it for them. We probably get a second-round pick for that. So that's my thought on this is that's probably what we do in that. Can you explain what kind of incentive the Golden State Warriors would have on trading for Markkanen before August 6th? Well, I think if they don't trade for him before August 6th, it's over. On August 6th, the Jazz I would suspect, if he's still on the roster, the Jazz are offering Lowry an extension. Now, when Lowry signs it, it's going to be the question a little bit on things. But I suspect that the Jazz are going to offer Lowry an extension on August 6th. And on August 6th, so on August 4th and 5th, the Warriors have to decide, like, are we willing to give up Podziemski? Are we willing to give Kuminga? Like the reports are that they are not willing to trade Kuminga or Podziemski under any circumstance. And so, what is it that the Jazz, on August 4th, when they know the Jazz are going to offer Lowry on August 6th, and if the Lowry signs the extension, then he's not movable for 6 months. So the Warriors win, and then if he signs the extension on August 7th, he's not movable that year because his 6 months happens after the trade deadline. So the Warriors really have a deadline sitting there around August 4th or 5th where they're going to have to decide whether they're willing to give up anything more than what they're willing to give up right now. And as of right now, they're clearly not willing to do whatever the Jazz want for Lowry Markkanen. What is the trade market for John Collins, Colin Sexton, and Jordan Clarkson? My hope is that we could trade 2 of the 3 of that group and keep Lowry. And then we could, I don't quite have the rest of that. So the trade market for John Collins, Colin Sexton, and Jordan Clarkson. I don't know the answer to that. I think one of the impacts of this first and second apron, unfortunately, is that I think some of this player movement on players of this nature is going to be more difficult because teams are up against it. And then they've gotten very diligent with their contracts. And now to go take a $27 million contract like John Collins or an $18 million contract like Colin Sexton, they're going to have to send you back the same amount of money, either because they're restricted by the first apron or because of the fact that they can't take in more money because they don't want to go to the second apron. And so that is, I think that the trade market, not because of who John Collins, Colin Sexton, or Jordan Clarkson is, as you're asking, is limited because of the fact that the way the first and second apron is having an impact on things. And so that, I think, is tying up some of the freedom of movement here that you might regularly get on some of those deals. It also might be something where you're going to need teams to, everyone thinks their roster is all right now. And you're going to need teams to kind of suddenly decide that, oh, wait a sec, we have an issue, we have a problem, our roster's not as good. John Collins can really fill that need, or Jordan Clarkson can really fill that need for us on those things. So that's the, both those guys have really reasonable contracts. John is a player option at $26 million next year, and Jordan is $14 million this year, $14 million next year. That's a pretty good number on both those guys. But I think the market itself is a bit restricted. Assuming the Jazz don't make any other big offseason moves, which seems likely at this point, what do you think would you put the win total at? 34? Is that? What do you think? 34? We were 31 last year, 37 the year before, 34? And where does that leave us in the draft? That's a really kind of good question. It was the next question that he was asking, and that I don't have it up on the screen. But if you were 34 this last year in the standings, you would have been kind of about the 9th, 8th pick of the draft. We'd be right about where we were again last year. If you want to get into the bottom 3, you probably have to get sub 20. Last year was 221s, a 15, and a 14. In 2022, 23, there was 222s and a 17. And this year, there does seem to be a concerted effort to get to the bottom. So I do think that you have 3 of those players. You're probably gonna have to be 22 or below if you want to be in the Cooper flag ball game. Who's on track to be the youngest team in the NBA next year? I think the Washington Wizards. I'd love to hear your takes on taking on Ben Simmons in a trade. Well, the question would you be getting Ben Simmons so that you could get assets, or you're trying to get Ben Simmons because he's a player? I have been incorrectly in on Ben Simmons this whole time and never relented on Ben Simmons at any point in time. And but I think that maybe that ship has sailed. When he was good, he was just incredibly good. And so I get the idea. I mean, he was just, I was so in on Ben Simmons in what he was capable of doing and where he could take the ball. He's a $40 million player this year, and he's a free agent at the end of the year. So sure, it would be nice if we got something for taking that salary. But frankly, I'm not sure what difference between that salary is. It's coming off their books. I'm not sure what they gain by doing that. Final question. You mentioned you played board games with your family a couple of weeks ago. Which games do you play? Is everyone in your family competitive? Oh, we have 2 Division I athletes as our kids. And my wife is the most competitive person in the house. So yes, Rummy Cube is the most favorite. My wife and son play Bananagrams all the time. Azul is a favorite, and Ticket to Ride when we have time. Have a great day. That is Locked On Jazz. Thanks so much for tuning in. This has been Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast in the Utah Jazz. On video, we send you the first ever national 24/7 sports channel, Locked On Sports. Today on audio, check out the Big 6 and 60.